before we dive in, we're going to briefly look back on all the highlights we missed on break. As usual, the summer kicked off with a string of championships. First, the Golden State Warriors dynasty marched past the Boston Celtics for their 4th NBA championship. Steph Curry took home his finals MVP, his first. I know it's hard to keep track of all his hardware. 10 days later, the Colorado Avalanche stomped on the Tampa Bay Lightning's dreams of a three-peat, winning the series in 4-2. I don't want to talk about that. The summer was also full of bittersweet celebrations. A golden age of tennis came to an end. Legends Serena Williams and Roger Federer both played their final professional matches, leaving fans and your host alike in tears. Baseball has been the Aaron Judge show, but we'll touch on that in a bit. TV is shaping sports like never before. Ted Lasso and the fictional AFC Richmond team are in FIFA. Everyone from Condoleezza Rice to Deadpool bought historic sports franchises. And the guy from the Wrangler Copperfit commercials ended up being a comically bad criminal. Speaking of scandals, owner of the Phoenix Suns and Mercury, Robert Sarver, announced he will be selling his team after an investigation into Sarver found a history of hostile, racially insensitive, and inappropriate behavior. But alas, when all hope seemed lost, college football returned. And it was glorious. Notre Dame embarrassed themselves early, starting 0-2. The Irish, Texas Longhorns, and UCLA Bruins all sit unranked, while USC has rolled to number 6 nationally in fashionable style. Their most recent win was a nail-biter up at Oregon State, and our own water cooler correspondent Carlo Jimenez was there to cover all the action. Let's see what he's got.
Here at Research Stadium, where the Trojans ripped the hearts out of the Oregon State Beaver fans. 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter after scoring 3 points in the first 3 quarters. I'm Carlo Jimenez here with the water cooler. And man, this place is as quiet as it was when Jordan Addison scored that game-winning touchdown. USC with 4 interceptions by the defense. Really, what a standout game by Alex Grinch's defense, who has now forced 14 turnovers through their first 4 games. The Trojans had to scrap and claw and fight for every yard here today. My MVP has to be Travis Dye. Travis Dye was fantastic for USC here today. Over 100 yards on the ground. 3rd straight game with over 100 yards. Picked up his own fumble at the 1 and really kept this team in this game offensively and defensively. The Trojan defense, once again, opportunistic. I wouldn't describe them as a tough defense. I wouldn't describe them as a defense that makes you earn every yard, but here and then they're going to force you to make a tough play, and the Trojan defense did just that. 4 picks, 3rd game of 4. They have forced 4 turnovers this season. Alex Grinch was asked about it after week 1. How often can this keep going? He said, why does it have to end? It hasn't ended. The Trojans continue to force interceptions and turnovers and set up their offense. Trojans had 10 of their 17 points tonight off turnovers after that final drive. I'm Carlo Jimenez saying so long from Research Stadium. The Trojans improved to 4-0, 17-14 win as they steal one from a loud 27,000 fan Research Stadium. They'll be back at home for Arizona State. Tomorrow we'll send it back to the desk at the water cooler.
Welcome back. We've made our way to the desk, and making his big return to the water cooler is Reagan Griffin Jr., and making his debut on the desk is Stefan LaGuardia. Stefan, welcome. Reagan, welcome back.
Yes, sir.
We are so happy to have you guys. We're so ready to get going. It's been months. I can't wait any longer. Let's dive headfirst into our staple segment, Water Cooler Talk. Roll the bump. Ooh, I'm so excited, guys. Right. Nothing better than a water cooler Friday.
All right. Well,
with the flashy transfers and talk of Heisman hopes, this USC defense has almost been overshadowed since before the season started. Now, they've led the nation with 14 turnovers and have bailed out Lincoln's offense multiple times. Is this defensive unit the real deal, guys?
I'll say this. It's important to note, turnovers are Alex Grinch's MO when it comes to being a defensive coordinator. It's not something that's happenstance. It's not random. This is what he's trying to do. It's been his thing ever since he was at OU. And the good thing is, in order to create turnovers as a defense, you need athletes and you need people who have football instincts. USC has both of those. We talk about Zaire Wright, we talk about Kalen Bullock, we talk about Mekhi Blackman, even Eric Gentry at the linebacker position. You have really quality athletes who have football instincts. That lends itself to creating turnovers. But on the flip side, this sort of kamikaze-style defense, is that going to be reliable against more disciplined teams like Oregon, like Utah, like Washington State? That remains to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, we're having trouble stopping the run game, but those DBs are definitely, making the turnovers and giving the USC offense the ball when they need it desperately. Stephen, what do you think?
So I'm going to take this from a bit of a macro perspective. So here, they aren't ranked necessarily high for total defense. They're 63rd in the nation for total defense, and they're 100th in the FBS for run defense. So even though they are still continuing to improve with the turnovers on that side of the ball, they do need to improve as a whole, especially in the run game. They are a very opportunistic defense. They will make you pay through the air. But I seriously think that they could touch up a little bit on the run defense. Sometimes when they do get the ball there, it looks like the parting of the Red Sea on that side of the ball. But one thing that I want to take away from last week in particular, the game against Oregon State, this is an area of the ball that a lot of people will consider the weakest link of USC. And I think that the defense had to carry this team for very long stretches of this game, as we saw at the final score. And I think that's super promising looking forward for this. That improves the culture, that improves the confidence, the morale boost of this defense. So
100%. I think to Stefan's point, you saw a game in which USC's defense needed to step up in order for them to win, and that's exactly what happened.
I mean, talking about all the points off turnovers, 10 of the 17 points USC scored against Oregon State came off of turnovers because that defense was able to give the ball back to the offense. You mentioned the struggle to stop the run game. A lot of these turnovers the USC defense are creating are in the red zone when the field is shrunk a little bit. How much do you think that's going to play into effect come into the season, the ability to not really stop them in the open field in the middle of the field?
I think it could come down to potentially one of those situations where a team marches down the field against them and then they just have to hope for the best in the red zone with that regard. But I do think it's something that the stock is rising for this defense for sure. And especially from last year to this year, it's night and day. They still do have improvement on that side of the ball, but I do think it's very promising looking forward.
Speaking of night and day, the Trojans are currently sitting at number 6 in the AP poll as they prepare to host the Arizona State Sun Devils. They're the highest-ranked Pac-12 team and are only placed behind Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, and Clemson. With the playoff conversation and all the talk heating up, is it a real possibility? What is the limit of this USC team under Lincoln year one?
I mean, here's what I'll say. It's difficult as a USC observer over the past 4 years to feel like it's possible within your grasp to actually be in the conversation to be one of the top 6, 5, 4, 3 teams in the national or in the college football playoff, right? But if we're looking at what's on the field, it's pretty evident that it's right there. Yeah. So as far as what's possible, I think truly the sky is the limit. You have a quality quarterback. You have an elite, dynamic offense. You have a defense who's held up its end of the bargain when called to. There's no holes in this team that are substantial enough for me to say they can't be a top 5 team. They can't make the playoffs. They can't. I'm not going to say we want them. They're not there yet. But they're a really good team.
You've had your heart messed with before. You're not ready to go all in yet. It's kind of what you're saying. Stephen, what do you think?
So I do think that there is definitely a potential for them to make the playoff. Do I think they can win the national championship? I'm not entirely sure, and here's why. No matter how good this offense is, they need to continue to improve that defense. And here's an interesting fact. Since the BCS era, there have been only 2 teams in college football who have won a national championship that did not have a top 25 defense. So I think it was the 2010 Auburn Tigers and the 2019 LSU Tigers. So it is quite the standard to live up to there. Yeah. But look, the perfect example here is Lincoln Riley's Oklahoma team and Ryan Day's Ohio State team. These offenses have been elite, like national championship title contender offenses. And USC is the same here. But that defense, there's no doubt that they need to have that solidified. And I think that you can't make every game a track meet. And once again, that was evident this past week against Oregon State. But, yes, they definitely have the potential to win a national championship.
You mentioned that 2019 offense led by Joe Burrow. That, I think, historically is known as one of the better offenses, the best college offense.
The best.
That being said, with USC and its high-powered offense, there is potential there for an offense to carry a team the whole way. It's just maybe USC is not there yet.
100%.
Agree to agree?
Well, I wouldn't venture to say that they're not there yet. I think that remains to be seen. I think what we saw last week was important as an observer standpoint because you needed to see USC be able to win an ugly game, right? Caleb did not have the best game out there. Jordan Harrison was shut down for a lot of the game. But when push came to shove, they came up with the plays needed to win that football game. Was it Oregon State? Sure. That's a team that I think is a little bit underrated. But
I agree.
100%. I think that's the type of game that I needed to see USC win, not these blowouts against Stanford, against Rice.
One last quick thing.
I do want to finish on one last thing. So, arguably, I think that the Pac-12, top to bottom, with the Big 12, is one of the most competitive conferences that we will see this year. So, before we get to the national championship talk, maybe the boys in Cardinal and Gamboge can maybe get through that conference first.
I fingers crossed. I like it. The MLB's regular season is coming to a close this weekend. Wait, please don't change the channel. Yes, we are going to talk about baseball. How can you not? It was a historic season this year. The Cleveland Guardians made their debut. Albert Pujols joined the 700 home run club, and the Mets don't suck. However, two stars really stole the show: LA pitcher Shohei Ohtani and New York Yankees slugger Aaron Judge. Both will surely be up for the American League MVP, but which one's going to walk away with the trophy?
Yo, I'm going to fight the uphill battle here, okay? Shohei Ohtani, that's your MVP. And look, I get it. 61 is cool. It's cute, right? We all love to see it. But what's the most important position in baseball? It's pitcher. It's the pitcher, right? Just like the quarterback is most important to his football team, the pitcher has the most control over the outcome of a game of any player on the field, right? As far as being a pitcher, Ohtani is 10th in strikeout to walk rate. Bring up some statistics here. 6th in earned run average. 2nd in strikeouts per 9 innings. He's definitely top 10. Arguably top 5 as it comes to being a pitcher in the MLB. And by the way, he's one of the most elite hitters on the other side of the ball as well. He has 10th in home runs, 16th in RBIs, 20th in runs, 24th in on-base percentage, 9th in slugging percentage. We've never seen anything like this, at least not in decades. Shohei Ohtani is bringing it offensively and defensively. He's the most dynamic. He's the most talented. He's the most valuable player in baseball.
I mean, you nailed it. Ohtani, 213 strikeouts, some like 34 home runs on the season for a pitcher. Incredible. But, Stephen, I believe you're taking the Yankee here, right?
You have some great points there, Reagan.
I appreciate
and let me just put it this way. This is one of the great MVP races of baseball that we've seen. And personally, I think they should just cut this award in half and maybe get it off.
Boo.
But
That's not what sports is about.
No, here we go. Here's the curveball here. Judge is on the verge of breaking a 61-year-old home run record for a single season in the AL. And on top of that, he's on the verge of a triple crown as we speak. Look, people like to make the case that because he's at Yankee Stadium, that short porch in right field, it's easier for him to hit home runs. Well, guess what? He has a higher slugging percentage on the road than he does at home. So he's performing better and hitting more home runs on the road than he is when he's at Yankee Stadium. I think one of the things that we're also taking into effect here is recency bias. Like, this award measures player value throughout the entire season, not just one moment in time. I think we're kind of neglecting the hot start that the Yankees and Aaron Judge had this year. And yes, their record since the All-Star break is abysmal, and it's comparable to that of the Angels right now. But here's a very interesting fact here. Judge's WAR, wins above replacement rating, is nearly a 10.5. The Blue Jays sit 9.5 games behind the Yankees. He has directly contributed to the Yankees winning their division and getting into the playoffs. Ohtani, on the other hand, his defensive WAR rating is actually in the negatives, and the Angels sit nearly 34 games behind the Astros. So, look, I'm not here to bash Ohtani. He's a one-of-one type talent. Generational, do not get me wrong, but in terms of the value that they bring, the difference here is the Yankees are in the playoffs and the Angels are on the couch.
You know, Stephen, you did mention it briefly. Aaron Judge did hit his 61st home run of the season Wednesday night, tying legendary Yankee Roger Maris' long-standing record. He even gifted the ball to his mom, which touched everyone's heart. We may want to now, but is crowning Judge the home run king a little too early? You just mentioned him.
So, and are you saying in terms of like?
Well, so here's the way I see it is, sure, he hits this record, 61, but in my mind, the greatest baseball player of all time is going to be Barry Bonds. Sure, PEDs, sure, steroids, whatever you want to say. The man hit 73 home runs in 2001.
I will pick up on that. Yeah, say what you want about those guys who did juice their way to history. That was a period in time where everybody was juicing.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, there was a book written by a former player who said, like, in 2005, there was 85% of the league was juicing around that time. Like, I'm not defending steroid use here, but it feels hypocritical to void the numbers of a steroid user when somebody like Gaylord Perry has admitted to scuffing baseballs. So,
here's what I'm going to say. I do not care. I don't care. If they use steroids, they use steroids. Look, in sports, we love to valorize, like, the meritocracy of it, the idea that the cream rises to the top, the best of the best will prevail. But we never see, or at least we never acknowledge the fact that to get to the top, a lot of times players, teams, franchises, coaches even, kind of tote the line of what's fair and just in sports to get to that pinnacle, right? Bill Belichick, Tom Brady. These players are getting paid with NIL's deal now, but there's been a lot of money in college sports way before this. We talk about the best of the best of the best. Let's talk about the people who hit the most home runs. Barry Bonds, Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa.
Reagan just wants to see home runs.
I just
wants
I
points
don't care. They got it, like, whatever.
That's all the time we've got for baseball, but we've got a lot of show left, including NFL disappointments, new faces in new places, and our first great debate. So stick around for more Water Cooler after the break. Welcome back to the Water Cooler. Back on the desk, joined by Reagan Griffin Jr. and Stefan De La Guardia. I'm your host, Alex Blau. Fantasy managers everywhere rejoice. The NFL is back, and this season had more energy and buzz around it than normal. Perhaps it was all the offseason signings or the raised level of play in the league, but it's safe to say many of the league stars have gotten off to a disappointing start. Our analysts are going to give given two names and have to decide which player has shocked them more. You guys ready for this?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's get into it. Despite squeaking out a win last night against the Miami Dolphins, Joe Burrow appears to be suffering from a Super Bowl hangover. Meanwhile, Tom Brady returned from his 40-day retirement to a slow Bucs offense that has yet to find a rhythm through 3 weeks. Guys, who's been more disappointing so far?
I'm going to have to say Joe Burrow, man. And it's not because he's been necessarily that bad, but he's been kind of mediocre to average. And to me, Joe Burrow is a special caliber of player on the level of the Josh Allens, on the level of the Lamar Jacksons, on the level of the Justin Herberts of the world. If he's not playing to that caliber, then he's disappointing me. So I'm going to say Joe Burrow.
I'm going to go with Tom Brady here. And it's disappointing because when he came back, I think we all kind of had this expectation that he was going to pick up right where he left off. And his interview in August kind of took us back. I've never seen him this vulnerable to the media before. He's saying he's got unique challenges in his life. He's 45. I got a lot going on. Like, it's something is definitely up. I've never heard him talk like that before.
He needs to retire.
You know, when stuff happens in the home, it's hard to not take it onto the field. But when you're the GOAT like that, I mean, it's what we expect from it. It's all business. It's weird. You were talking about it. You know, everyone last year for the Bengals expected them to be the Bengals. This year they are that Super Bowl team. So I feel like you're right. Everyone expects Joe to be playing like Joe.
Yeah.
But in my head, if he's playing like he is now a year ago from today, I feel like a lot of people would say, oh, he's making – first game was bad, 4 picks. No denying that's a bad sign. But since there, I feel like, you know, for Joe, it's too early to stress.
Right. No, there's definitely plenty of time for both of these guys to kind of pick up where they left off in the past.
Absolutely. Moving on to our second one, the Denver Broncos and Las Vegas Raiders, division rivals, may I remind you, both handed their franchises to new head coaches. Nathaniel Hackett and Russell Wilson clearly have some time management and scoring issues, while Josh McDaniels and the Raiders are staring down the barrel of an 0-4 start. Once again, guys, who are you more disappointed with?
I'm going to go Nate Hackett here, and here's why. Broncos fans were ecstatic when they got him. Listen, he's one of the NFL's youngest coaches. He comes from the Matt LaFleur coaching tree. He got Aaron Rodgers back-to-back MVP awards. He was considered this offensive guru that was going to fix all their problems on that side of the ball. Through 3 games, it's averaging around 14 points a game. And he's got a star-studded offense. Russell Wilson, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Javonte Williams. They haven't even faced any formidable opponents yet either. Seattle, Houston, San Francisco. They still have to play their entire division twice. I'd be losing it if I had to play the Chargers, Kansas City, and Vegas twice.
Broncos fans may be hoping they don't have another Mike McCarthy on their hands. Reagan, who are you taking here?
It might be giving them time to get adjusted to the elevation. But I'm going to take Josh McDaniels, man. And let's say this about Josh McDaniels in terms of the context, right? This is a dude that spent, a decade under Bill Belichick? This is a dude that had the fiasco with Indianapolis, accepted the job, then rescinded the job. He was clearly looking for the perfect situation to step into and be the head coach that he wanted to be. Well, here you are. Here you are, and not to mention the fact this is a team that went 10-7 last year, added Chandler Jones, added Devontae Adams, and you haven't won a game yet. I have a particular beef with Josh McDaniels, and I don't have that many beefs around the NFL, but I don't understand why, after all this time, you can come and take a head coaching gig and flop like this. It's not a good look.
Raiders owner Mark Davis thinking the same thing. He did bring Josh McDaniels in for a private closed-door meeting after the loss. Najee Harris and Austin Eckler were 2 stud running backs sure to have gone in the first round of your fantasy football drafts. Through 3 games, the 2 have combined for only 208 yards and 1 rushing touchdown. Guys, Eckler, Najee, who's been worse so far?
Well, if I was a fantasy owner, I would say Najee, or I would say Eckler, but I'm going to say Najee in terms of the function of the offense and the role that he has to play, given the fact that you have Mitchell Trubisky as a starting quarterback, given the fact that really you have not a whole lot of talent on that offense outside of Najee. They needed him to take the helm, and he's not averaging even 4 yards a carry. We're talking about 3.2 yards a carry, just 1 touchdown. His longest run is just 11 yards, y'all. They need more from Najee if this team has any chance at being competitive this year.
What do you
So I actually do have Austin Eckler on my fantasy team, so this is maybe why this argument is heightened for me. Look, the Chargers' depth at running back was questioned all offseason, but at the end of the day, they could always fall back on Austin Eckler. But guess what? 32 attempts, 80 rushing yards, 2.5 yards a carry. Last week, 5 yards against Jacksonville. That's abysmal. I expected an encore of 20 touchdowns this season, but given the firepower of this offense, I expected that as well, but I'm going to have to draw back those expectations big time.
Now I'm going to have to separate you two, but get ready, because it's time to pivot back to college football. It's time for my favorite segment. Put your gloves on. Let's do the great debate.
Yes, sir.
Many were stunned this summer as it was announced that USC and UCLA will be abandoning the sinking ship that is the Pac-12 for the Big Ten Conference. The move, surrounded primarily around media rights, doesn't officially take place until 2024. Despite this, chaos has ensued. Outrage has broken out in the rapidly changing landscape of college football. Was the Pac-12 exit the right move? Was going to the Big Ten the right decision for USC?
I will kick this off right here. There's a lot to unpack here, and at the end of the day, I'd say yes. And I think the Pac-12 will fall apart pretty soon, but that's a different argument right there. But look, the SC brand dominates the West Coast. The exposure to these other parts of the country is going to be hugely beneficial for USC, and I'll tell you why. So let's start off with this. Big Ten teams are slated to make an estimated $75 million annually with the new TV contract. USC joining in on that as well. So I want to take a case study here with Alabama, and because USC stock is rising with Lincoln Riley at the helm and everything like that. Yes, I do think football was more or less the biggest thing that was taken into consideration here. But look, in 2007 when Saban was hired, 23,000 students were enrolled at the University of Alabama. Today, there's nearly 40,000, and more than half of those students are coming from out of the state. So this is not only benefiting from an athletic but an academic standpoint. Like, why are all these kids from out of state flocking to Tuscaloosa, Alabama? And it's because Bama's football team made it cool to go there. And it's also a revenue generator as well. In 2010, Alabama was generating $338 million, and now they're generating over $800 million in revenue. This is a huge benefit.
Steph, you're absolutely right. Money talks. The bid after USC joined the Big Ten, they actually got a $7 billion media right deal because of the new move. Reagan,
now, hold on, man. You think USC needs more students? I'm walking around campus every day. I think we're good on that. Do you think we need more money? I think we're chilling
Well,
there.
I don't think Carol Fult's ever going to say no to that.
That's very true. Now, I'll say this, right? It helps football, obviously. But I wonder how much it benefits all of USC sports, right? When I think about women's volleyball, when I think about rowing, when I think about golf, when I think about the more obscure sports that don't make as many headlines, I'm wondering if it's going to help everybody, right? We talk about trickle-down economics. I don't want to get into my politics and whatnot, but it doesn't really work if we've seen from the history of capitalism, America, and Ronald Reagan, all that, right? Just because football is making money, just because USC is making money, doesn't mean that's going to help everybody in this scenario, right? So I'll say this. It has the potential for good, but if I'm keeping up with the track record of this university, I'm keeping up with the track record that trickle-down economics has, it's not really going to benefit everybody. It's going to benefit Lincoln Riley. It's going to benefit the football players. It's going to benefit Carol Folt. It's going to benefit the people at the top.
I got to ask real quick to close this out. A lot of this move has been criticized because of the trend moving towards the super conferences. Do you guys think there's a real threat in that with this move to USC?
I think that ultimately we're just going to be in a conferenceless national football or NCAA. That's
one
at
big
least
conference.
as it relates to football. I can very much see a future in which teams just schedule who they want to schedule, screw the conferences, because at this point it's going to be an SEC versus Big 12 show, and it's not going to be fair to the other schools in the country.
Yeah, and the Big 10 and Big 12 are literally ripping apart the Pac-12 as we speak. They're in talks to just literally obliterate this entire conference. So, yes, we are in that direction of super conferences coming, I think. But at the end of the day, yes, I do think you cannot sit here and tell me that the identity of a major university does not trickle back to its football team. All of the traditions here from SC, V for Victory, Fight On, Traveler, all that has its origins back to football here. And so I do think this is great.
Wow. Well, that was heated. That was electric. First one of the show. I loved it, guys.
I'm mad.
We've stuffed a whole lot into this show, and unfortunately, we've almost got to get out of here. But we do have time for one more thing. It's time for final memos. Ha Ha Clinton-Dix, Coco Crisp, Cannonball Titcomb. For decades, sports have showcased not only some of the greatest individuals, but the most legendary names. Wednesday's historic Yankee game was no different. While Aaron Judge hammered number 61, the fan who had his hands on the ball fumbled the bag big time. The press has now identified the home run dropper as Toronto supporter Frankie Lasagna. Guys, how does this name stack up?
Well, I guess there was too much sauce on that ball, huh?
Oh,
Come on.
wow. Ha, ha, ha.
I feel bad for the guy, honestly. Hopefully, Marie Callender's or Stofers can get him an endorsement deal or something with that last
Dude,
name.
Stover's idea would be great, but the problem is he can't catch the ball. So
Yeah.
it's like, what's he going to get an endorsement
You might need some
for?
oven mitts.
I mean, hopefully maybe he's got a group of friends. There could be Vinny Vino, Paulie Prosciutto, Billy Bruschetta, all those guys. could be
He ended
coming
up
to
giving this ball to his mom, right?
Aaron Judge did. He did.
So maybe it's a good thing,
It's a
right?
good
Because
thing
if he
he
caught it, he'd be the a-hole who never gave Aaron Judge his ball back.
Lasagna
right?
the a-hole.
It was on purpose. You could tell by his face he did it on purpose. You know what I'm saying?
I hope so, man, because it's a heartwarming.
He's like, oh my gosh, what a sweet moment this is going to be for their mother.
He's not even a Yankee fan.
Right.
Not even a Yankee fan. I
No,
bet he's not
yeah.
even a baseball fan, if you ask me, to be honest. But, more power to him. Had he caught the ball, I'm sure he could have negotiated some sort of exchange to Aaron Judge. Maybe a signature, maybe a photo. I'm not sure. That's going to do it for us today. We hope you've enjoyed our first show, and we can't wait to show you all we've got in store this season on the water cooler. For Reagan Griffin Jr., Stephanie LaGuardia, Carlo Jimenez, the entire cast and crew, I'm Alex Wow. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.